Hi, I'm Linda Wilson. I did a lot of oral histories for Tekaluktun many years ago, about 2006 and 2007. I did the photography, and we did quite a few people, and I learned so much. It was amazing. And I met some really nice people that I'm still in contact with. So basically, I was originally born in the Midwest. I was raised by my grandparents in a farm in Oklahoma. And I'm Native American and Irish. And my grandmother's farm where I stayed was the Native American part. And then my mother was a journalist. And she lived in Wichita, Kansas, which is a very hateful place, but she worked for the Wichita Eagle and Beacon and for the Kansas City Star. So I had that, I had that knowledge about journalism growing up in terms of, how much time it took and a certain respect for it and a certain bit of knowledge. My mother was always on the typewriter. But I really grew up until high school on a farm in Oklahoma with my grandparents, which was really the best. So then I decided I was going to come to either San Francisco to go to the Art Institute or to go to the Chicago Art Institute. And I was really kind of in a dilemma because I didn't really have much money. And I was sort of really on my own, so I went to Santa Fe, New Mexico, which I spent a wonderful year in the 60s. I was 62 and 63. And I really learned a lot about things I didn't know anything about. Had some really good friends from the Native American Art Institute there that we used to hang out with. Some weavers and sculptors. And I worked really hard. And I got a really good job finally at the telephone company, which was really kind of pivotal to me because it was a union job. And it paid really well. Whereas if I had worked at, the restaurants or the cafes or something, I don't know that I would have ever got here. So I also found out through the Southwestern Bell, as it was called, in telephone company, that I could transfer to San Francisco, which was brilliant, And so I did. And that's what I did. I transferred to what you call Pacific Bell, and then I enrolled in the Art Institute up on Chestnut. And, that school wasn't really that expensive then. And it didn't really cost that big a percentage of your income to just, because I still had this high-paying job in San Francisco. It was a big union town then. And that was a union job. So I had benefits and everything, which a lot of the students at school didn't have,
How old were you at the time?
I was probably then maybe 19, 17, 19, yeah. And, I really didn't realize how lucky I had been, sort of, to land that telephone company job in Santa Fe. So then I was able to go on part-time at Pacific Bell, and I used to do, a lot of people get a kick out of this, but I used to do all the recordings on the San Francisco phone, like the weather and the time, and a lot of stuff that people don't even know about now, because I was on at night. And I was told I had a very good voice for telephones. So I did. I did a lot of it. And it was really funny because my friends got a kick out of it. At the Art Institute, they would dial these things. And now there aren't any operators like there were in those days. But it was a good skill. And it helped me get through school and buy supplies. And then I was married. I got married in Santa Fe. And we both went to the Art Institute together. So that's really how I got here.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was. It was an interesting time. North Beach was solid Italian, family people. It was amazing. There were all these Italian delis and pasta places and cheese shops, and none of that is left. It was just amazing. And in the 60s at the Art Institute, really changed my life, because a lot of people think, oh, the Art Institute, and it's so arty and all that, but actually, they had some very progressive faculty. And in the, what we call the rotunda, I don't know if anyone has been there to see it, you guys, but there's this beautiful fountain, and then there's this patio. It's very like sort of kind of Mexican, inspired architecture, but we would have these meetings out there at the lunch hour, and they would bring all these people from SNCC, Students for Nonviolent Committee, or from Vietnam, they would have these people there, and we would I was really introduced to a lot about politics that I was not knowledgeable about very early through the Art Institute. And they weren't required, but everybody went. And so that's when I really started getting political, was at the Art Institute, and it was definitely through Vietnam. And through the civil rights, but I didn't go to the South like some people did. I didn't work on voter registration. I was really more geared towards the arts until I got to the Art Institute. And then Vietnam became this major, major issue in my life. Yeah.
So I think you just answered the first question. Tell us why and how you came to be a community organizer in the Mission District. So the second question is, describe the kind of community organizing work you did in the Mission District.
Well, first, I didn't always live in the Mission like a lot of my friends. I mean, I wasn't born here, and I'm not, second generation or so I don't know a lot of the stuff that a lot of people do. But I moved into this house in 1973. So my husband and I, we had a hard time. He was a community activist, and he worked for the city in Mission Mental Health, and he worked for Mission Rebels, and he worked for different youth organizations, really early ones. And we just kept having to leave all these places because the rents were going up. So we decided we were going to buy a house through this program through HUD called Mission Housing Development Corporation, which is still around actually. And a bunch of Roger's friends in those days, all guys, and a couple of women working in the Mission, all applied to this program. You had to live in the Mission, you had to work in the Mission, and you had to just sort of sign in blood that you weren't going to flip it over and make a fortune, And we got it. We got this house, and it was like $22,000. So it was like an amazing thing for us, less than rent,
Wow.
So that just put us pretty stable. And I worked here in the Mission too. Actually, my first job in the Mission, to be honest with you, is, I don't know if you know Dore's studio on Mission Street. It's sort of a.
Is it still there?
Oh yeah.
The dance hall?
No, it's Dore's, DORES, photography studio, and it's like a glamour studio, but it's also where everybody got their high school pictures and their wedding pictures and their first communion pictures, and it's like a real institution. And I worked there, doing light, backing up, changing camera lenses for Audrey was her name, and she was still there when I was there. And then I also helped put on false eyelashes and glitter and the feather boas and all that stuff. And then we played all the 70s music, and it was hot, So, it was really kind of fun. And it was a perfect job for me because I was in graduate school, and I could just, it didn't take that much thinking afterwards. So then that was the first job I had in the Mission, and I think that's where I was working when we applied, and they couldn't believe I worked for Dore's. It's just like everybody knew her, and everybody had their kids or their parents' pictures there. It's still there. The archive there is amazing. I don't know what will happen to it. It's a shame. But anyway, so then I started getting a little more active then, because actually, to be honest with you, because my husband was such a community activist in the Mission, and I was a little more in the arts and citywide. I was some of the first community activism I ever really did was I was part of the really early food conspiracies. I don't know if you've heard about those or read about them.
Does it have to do like GMOs and?
We didn't even know about GMOs then, but
or
what
the
it
whole
was,
unsanitary thing.
Well, it was more about. There's a little bit left of it, like Rainbow came out of that, and so did a couple of other things. And there was a big one right here called Seeds of Life on Balmy Alley. But the one I was really active with was the Noe Valley and the Mission, and we met every week. And we handed out these sheets to everybody that was in the collective. It was a collective called the Food Conspiracy. But and there was Red Star Cheese, and it was very political, and some of these groups only hired guys who were out from prison and stuff. It had its, but basically it was just about getting, fresh eggs and fresh milk and good vegetables. So people would go out to the, what do you call it on Alameda still? Alameda,
The farmer's market.
farmers markets, early in the morning and get people's orders. So you didn't have to do it, you had an order, right? And then we had cheese, we had fish for a while, but it was too difficult to do. But mainly we had vegetables and dried beans and rice and all that sort of stuff, and peanut butter and oils and stuff that we made. And we met in people's basements and garages and stuff. And so it doesn't sound very political, and now particularly, but at the time it was. You know what I mean? And we really were dedicated. I mean, we went to these meetings, and I met a lot of interesting people that way. And then when we you had to come there and pick up your food. You know, it wasn't delivered to your house. So you came, and then you signed up for when you were going to go. Like, I liked particularly to go to Petaluma and get eggs. Because you know, I was from the country, you know, so I never got much of a chance to be in farms anymore, so I enjoyed that. Not that I wanted to live on one, but it was nice to go there, you know. And I was really active in that. And it was involved with the mission. You know, the Red Star Cheese was down here, and Seeds of Life was down here, and then they were all over the city, really, though. You know, so, and that was in the early 70s, yeah.
Okay.
So that's one thing I'm still very proud of, yeah. Because, you know, like I said, Rainbow came out of it, and a lot of very healthy attitudes about food, I think. Yeah.
What were your strengths as a community organizer?
It's interesting.
It's a tough one.
Yeah, you know, I mean, a lot of the work I did, I was very lucky. I got hired by a lot of nonprofits. I worked for Creativity Explored. I worked for Intersection for the Arts. I was the gallery director there for about 12 years. And I did a lot of curatorial work that was very multicultural in the 70s, you know, nationally. But I didn't really know them. I just had their books and stuff. They had a big influence on me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the next question is, what did you accomplish as a community organizer in the Mission District?
Well, it sort of depends on which decade we're talking about. You know, it's hard to say, but I would say that I helped in terms of organizing some really amazing exhibitions at the Mission Cultural Center in conjunction with dance and theater and poetry and stuff, which were, people still talk about some of those events. You know, like I said, we had the money then. And people were really activated because of what was going on in Central America. So we really had some amazing exhibitions. And the same thing with Intersection for the Arts. You know, I mean, when they hired me as a gallery director, they knew that I was working with Tecolote, and they knew I was political. And they wanted to try that, you know, because of what was going on in the times. And so my whole goal was to put together politics and art, you know, and bring those people into a gallery like Intersection for the Arts, had been around since the 60s, and kind of open it up. I mean, we would do things like have John Santos, I would have him come sing and stuff in conjunction with an exhibit, you know, I mean, just things that I knew from the mission that the people from Intersection didn't know. So I think I accomplished a lot of that, bringing that in. And then at Tecolote, I think we can talk about that later, but yeah, I really put in a lot.
Next question is, in looking back at your days as a community activist, is there anything you would have done differently?
I would have taken grant writing classes, but I just couldn't do it. And I would have learned more about computers earlier. You know, when I was growing up and in high school, women that didn't want to become secretaries and stuff just didn't take typing, and I was one of them. I took another art class instead of typing. I just dropped it. And even though my mother was a journalist, you know, and I just didn't ever think that's what I was going to do. And then everything became keyboards. So it was a mistake on my part, but I still don't enjoy keyboards. So it's like, you know, I do the best I can do. But I can do Photoshop and whatever, but, you know, I'm not really a whiz at computers. I should have. I went to school, and then I had tutors come over here and teach me Photoshop and things I wanted to learn. Because I had a big dark room downstairs, and when I got rid of that, I just went over to digital. But yeah, I regret that. But it's hard to know ahead of time.
Yeah.
But I didn't become a secretary for some awful place either, you know, so that was good. I would rather have been the telephone operator. That worked out well for me. I think people have to have skill. I think they had to at my age, and my grandmother used to tell me that, and I'm so glad she did. You know, it's like, I think it's hard now in today's world to know what is going to be a skill in 10 years, but it can't hurt to just get one. You never know how it will morph. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And you learn a lot. I worked as a color lab printer for years in darkrooms, big labs during many, you know, after I quit doing the PBX work. And, you know, I had friends who wouldn't do that. They thought, oh, you know, we just have to be artists and we don't want to do this to our photography, but I did. I worked at a lot of labs and I learned a lot. I learned about working too, and about working conditions and all kinds of things, you know. I worked at, it's not exactly the Mission, but it was through the Mission I met him. I worked at Harvey Milk's camera store on Castro Street when I was in graduate school. I developed all the film and made all the contact sheets at night.
Wow.
It was an amazing job. You know, I was so lucky that he hired me, and it was just the perfect job. No, all those guys are dead, you know, they're all gone, and it was really hard on me, you know, when Harvey got killed and everything. But, you know, when I was working there, when the Castro was really sort of in bloom, it was very, and Harvey was a very political guy. People don't realize that. He was very involved in the Mission. That's how I met him. He knew my husband. He was working on community health, and you know, it was like just sort of a divine place to work until it became awful to work there, you know. But yeah, I think yeah, that was an interesting part of my life too.
Okay.
I mean, skills, you know, things that you can get paid for, you know. You just can't ever say, oh, I'm above that, you know what I mean? I just think, no matter how you look at it, yeah.
Okay. How has the Mission District changed from the time you were actively involved?
Well, you know, I could get real bitter, or I could just be,
Go off.
oh, I could just be so honest, you know. It's really hard to explain to people how much it's changed, you know. It's just, first of all, and I am just so blessed that my husband and I bought this house. Because if we hadn't bought this house, you know, I certainly would not still be in the Mission. You know, I mean, I could not possibly afford the kind of rents that people are paying now. And neither could the woman who lives upstairs, who used to be one of the editors of Tecolote, and she works for Just Cause, and you know, she could never stay here. I mean, it's just because I bought this house early and everything's cheap, you know what I mean? But wow, but it's the cost of housing and the cost of renting a storefronts and businesses too that's really been awful. But it's worse than that, you know. It's a much more conservative element coming into the city, and it makes a lot of sense. When I lived in North Beach, and you had this huge Italian community, and they got older, they on their own initiative they retired and they bought these big houses, you know, out in the suburbs, and it all worked out. And then new businesses came in, you know, but it wasn't like a bloody thing like I could see the Mission as. I mean, here, you know, people are just literally evicted out on the street. And I'm not over exaggerating, you know. I'm part of you know, I'm a senior, so I have the social worker from On Lock and 30th Street Senior Housing, and he tells me these stories about his clients that are even older than me, who literally just every week they have like no place to go. And they're mostly Spanish speaking, not all, but mostly, not all. But it's happening everywhere in this city. And the cultural thing, I'm always been into like a lot of different cultural things. It just interests me. But a lot of the people moving in here, they're not. And they're young and they come from suburbs and they have a lot to learn. I can remember, it's interesting to talk to you guys about this. I learned a lot at the Art Institute because I was lucky to have those professors, who really were informed about this stuff. And these young people just don't have that. And I hear them on their phones out on the street, and they say terrible things. I can't believe how they're describing places and their language. So I don't know where they were raised, and I don't know where they're going to learn to be, for lack of a better word, just more curious about other people and other ways of living. But they have at this point, it's become pretty bad. There's a lot of hostility, between a lot of the young tech workers and people in the mission, the activists. I would say it's pretty bad now. I don't know if it's obvious to everybody around, but if you follow certain things on Facebook or, the 24th Street guy, Eric, and all these guys, they're trying so hard to save these, historical places, but they're not. They're just, you're up against so much money. So much money, So, just even last week, it was so hard for us. La Victoria closed, the bakery, where I've been going for, since 1973 probably, and for their macaroons, they were the best. And I used to go to the restaurant the family had, and I knew the son of the original family was with us at the beginning of Tecolote in the 80s. So, it's just, that's gone. And then Galleria's going, they say now that they're going to stay because they're going to hold on to one part. But, I really doubt that because those people are just going to jack that rent up too, and they can't afford that. It's just tragic. And then Casa Bompak, I don't know if you guys have ever seen that shop on Valencia Street. And she's the one who imports all those political piñatas, the Trump piñatas and all that stuff, and the Trump toilet paper. But she also makes incredible paper cuts herself, and she makes these custom ones that we used to order at Tecolote all the time to go with exhibitions and stuff. She's gonna quit, she's just so tired, and I don't think anybody else can pick it up, from her. She's offering if anybody wants to, she'll sell them the business, but that was just pure, again, dedication. That one started with the Chiapas thing, and in the beginning, all the sales from that shop when it was on 24th across from La Boheme all went to Chiapas. And then later, as the Chiapas thing kind of mellowed out, she brought in more things from other parts of Mexico and other things. And, but she has all these classes down there, and a lot of people go there all the time. It's a little far from me because I'm not that mobile.
What advice would you give young people today who see themselves as community organizers?
I've always felt this too. You have to listen to people. You have to, and I don't just mean older people. I mean young people even. People that don't. You have to try and figure out where they're coming from. You have to listen and find out why. If they don't know about something, why they don't know about it, and where they went to school. What they do. I always like to find out how people support themselves. That's always been my big thing in life. You would meet somebody in the arts or in different committees I worked on, and I had an art teacher who taught me to do this. Is always ask somebody who you really admire, how they basically pay their bills. And it's amazing. it's just amazing. I think it's a really good thing to do. I don't know if you know Alejandro Mardia, the poet and writer. He earned his living for years driving Muni buses. And, people don't realize that. He retired from Muni because my husband also switched over to Muni when the cuts came from Reagan. And, that guy worked hard.
Yeah, that was one of my teachers, our teachers.
Yeah, and, you think, oh, well, he's got it so made. Oh, no, this guy worked his head off, And Muni was not an easy job. And that's why he supported his family and his kids, and his wife. And, I think Alejandro and his wife, Magali, they bought their house the same way Roger and I bought ours because they're sort of the same generation.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm always people are so surprised when I say, "Oh, he used to drive a bus." And, no,
That was for sure.
Yeah.
you just don't know, do you? You
I never
know?
knew
To
that.
bring it back to the question.
How do you think poets pay the rent? I don't know.
Do you feel like you answered that question about what was it, like what advice?
What advice would you give young people today who see themselves as community organizers?
Yeah, ask people that
Yeah.
you're working with so you understand what they're going through
Yeah.
or not going through. I mean, bottom line, are they doing this because it's just going to mean something to them for 4 months for a credit or something, or are they really into this? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's because, both are okay. Both are okay to have, but you want those people that really,
Yeah.
I think. But we need to talk about Tecolote.
Also, Juan mentioned you were the photo archivist for Tecolote. Do you want to?
Yes, I really have been doing volunteer work for Tecolote since the 80s. I started off in the 80s going down on Saturdays because, I had a lot of technical skills in photography and Tirso. And I would use this great, big, huge camera to make the stats of photographs that then had to be made into halftones that then could be printed in the paper. And this was an antique, because it was Tecolotes, and we just played with it like it was a baby. And but I loved doing that. So I wasn't a part of the collective then. I just came in and did the stats, and I also printed some of the photos for the paper on the weekends because I had good friends who worked there, and I would see them too. And then I would leave when the big staff meetings. So I wasn't a part of the original collective. Some people think I was, but I wasn't. And then over the years, I volunteered a lot for them at different events. And then when I quit working and I started having trouble with my mobility, Tecolote asked me to work on the Los Veteranos project to do the photographing, and I did that. And that's sort of how I kind of got back in touch more daily because they're right around the corner. They bought their building,
Yeah.
Thank goodness, through money from bingos, like they did it, So I was over there working on a lot of projects and trying to build a website of old photos. And then I went through these boxes in the back, and they were just mildewed and old, and they were full of manila envelopes and old photo envelopes and negatives and stuff. And, I had a slight museum studies background. I never finished it, and I started looking at it, and I went, oh my God, these are silver prints that people used to print up their own photographs to send to Tecolote, And they left them there, and they're there, hard copy, silver prints on paper, which are worth a lot of money and has a lot of history too. Particularly Santana's things, a lot of people's stuff. So I met with Juan, and I met with Eva Martinez, who was the ED then, and I told him, I said, I think I have the skills to do this. I will give you my time 2 to 3 days a week, organizing this in archival sleeves, the negatives, the photos, everything. We're going to try and identify, but we'll get to that later. I'm going to do it by subject matter because these boxes are all out of order and I can't do it by year. But I need you guys to pay for the supplies. And Juan just jumped on it, because Juan is amazing. He kept everything. I mean, he had envelopes of letters from poets that wrote to Tecolote from the 80s and 70s. I mean, poets that are really well known now, who've died now and stuff. And he had all this stuff. So I just didn't want to see it in the trash. And Juan didn't either. But he, and a lot of people wanted all this stuff to get organized. But they didn't want it. I thank God they didn't throw it away. So I started doing that at least twice a week. And it took me 5 years. It really did. It took me, and while I was doing it, I had exhibitions of it. At the Cultural Center, I had 2 of them, and at Back to the Picture, I had one. And the people would come, and they were amazed at these photos of themselves, and their kids, or their grandparents, back in the day. And we didn't sell them, because legally we couldn't sell these prints, There's a lot of legalities that you're probably learning, but, a newspaper has a one-time reprint copyright, but you
Mhm.
can't just be selling it for hundreds of dollars. You can use it though for educational purposes, like a book that's educational and goes to a nonprofit, but you can't like sell a print that somebody gave to Tecolote, to be in the paper for $500, which we could have, but I mean, financially you could have, but legally you can't do that. So what we did do is figure out what we could do. And we did as much as we could in terms of education with it. We had it in lots of different venues, but the books just kept building up. I mean, the archive was full of these big binders that was probably as big as this kitchen all the way around, and it just kept growing. And I had to keep up on new technological things. And Georgiana Hernandez came in as the ED, and she was brilliant. And we contacted the Bancroft Library, and we got into negotiations, and they came out and looked at everything and talked to me and talked to them. And Stanford was interested too, but we didn't really like dealing with Stanford. We felt it was a little more conservative politically. And we negotiated, and we sold it for $120,000. Not last year, but the year before, which is, pays off the mortgage. It was just an amazing accomplishment, and we feel, now it's there. People can go there and use it and research it, and people used to. I used to have a lot of fun. People would come in and use our archive for their graduate papers, or for, books. We worked with a lot of people doing books on the mission. And it was always just say El Tecolote Photographic Archive, credits. That's all we asked for. And then we used to charge $10 a print if we gave them a JPEG online. But it had to be something that wasn't going to make a lot of money. We just said no. We had very strong, there again, goals. It was educational.
Yeah.
Nonprofit or a university book or something like that. So I think that's, I'm just so glad I did that, because as I got older and not as mobile, it was just the perfect thing for me to do. And it just sort of put all my skills with photography, and also the fact that I knew a lot of these people in the photos. That's what was amazing. I think that's what Juan gets such a kick out of, is that I ended up doing that, and I kind of knew these people and these events. I mean, I knew which teatro that was. I knew, which exhibit that was. I knew which demonstration that was. Not because I was at the head of it, just because I was here and I knew.
Yeah.
Not always. We called people in and had these little coffee and whatever Pandolce parties, and we would put Post-its on the outside of the plastic sheets, and they would say who it was. Because, I didn't know everybody. Particularly in the music scene, I didn't know everybody. And the music thing was huge. I mean, oh my God. Latin jazz and the stuff he had. I mean, Juan was very interested in Latin music. And he still is, and he's very knowledgeable. And he wrote a lot of reviews of Willie Colon at State. Like in one of the first issues of Tecolote, they interviewed Willie Colon. So this was like we had those photos.
Yeah, I would love to see that archive one day.
Yes.
I feel like it's important for these everyone
Yeah.
And I loved
so they
it.
can check themselves.
I loved it, and I really enjoyed, and through that archive I reconnected with a lot of people I'd worked with over the years in the mission,
It's beautiful.
So I think that's probably, the last big project I've worked on. I mean, I have a series of photographs that I do now on the interiors of taquerias and places I know are going. It's kind of depressing, but I've been doing that for quite a few years. But really the archive, I think that's there, Someone else organized the original drawings and cartoons and all that stuff. I did the photos. So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So if you guys get a chance, you can call the Bancroft. It's a great resource.
Yeah, I
It's
bet.
one of the biggest archives of photos of Native Americans, in California. It's just amazing.
We're gonna wrap it up.
Anything else?
Oh, is there anything you would like to add?
Is there anything else you would like to add?
No, I just like to thank you. This is nice. It's always nice.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us. Actually,
Inviting us
it was
into your home.
very interesting. This
Good.
whole conversation.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
All right.